Welcome to this peaceful moment, a place where you can slow down, breathe, and let your body relax. Take a deep breath in and let it go slowly. Feel the tension begin to fade, little by little. I'm glad you're here, and if you enjoy this kind of calming content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next sessions. Now, let's begin our journey into relaxation and calm. On a still night that felt as if time itself had not yet begun, when cities did not yet exist and the earth knew nothing of civilization, fire alone lit the darkness. Imagine its smoke rising slowly toward the sky, while men and women huddled around it in a small circle. Their faces were smeared with clay and soot, their eyes fixed on the silent wilderness, as though afraid that something hidden in the heart of the night might awaken. It was in that ancient time, thousands of years ago, that the very first stories of humanity were born, and also the tale that only the soil has immortalized, how early humans buried their dead, and how they lived in a world that knew nothing but harshness and wonder. The ancient humans lived on the edges of forests and valleys, tracking the traces of animals, listening to the wind, knowing that their survival depended on their ability to read signs. Life for them was a daily adventure with unpredictable outcomes. At dawn, they would gather fruits or hunt their prey, returning before nightfall to a shelter carved into a rock or covered with dry branches. There was no language as we know it, only whispers, gestures, and calls, but still, they understood each other almost instinctively, and though their existence was devoted entirely to survival, something quietly stirred within them, a vague awareness of death, of the one who disappears suddenly and does not return. At first, death was understood as disappearance when a member of the group fell. They would watch the body in long silence, then move away as if an invisible force had taken it. They left the body exposed on a rock, under a tree, without any ritual or care. For life pressed on swiftly and did not allow them to linger. But as centuries passed, and social bonds grew stronger, accompanied by emerging feelings of grief, fear, and attachment, humans began to find a different way to cope with absence. The first funerary ritual they knew was simple, a mound of soil thrown over the body to protect it from wild animals. Yet over time, archaeologists discovered evidence of something deeper. In some ancient graves, bodies were placed in specific positions, accompanied by stone tools, bones, or shells. This indicates that early humans did not bury their dead merely for protection. They did it for a deeper reason, perhaps to give them something they might need on the next journey, or because the vague idea of life after death was beginning to take shape in their minds. Some early tribes buried their dead near their homes, inside a cave or a carefully prepared pit. The body was laid on its side as if preparing for sleep, covered gradually with soil. These rituals were not performed in complete silence. Sometimes they were accompanied by a soft chant, the tapping of stones or murmured words resembling prayers. The humans stood around the body, watching as it disappeared beneath the earth, feeling that they were preserving something important, a final protection for someone who had lived among them. Burial was not merely a means of disposing of a body. It became an emotional and collective event. When a strong member or skilled hunter died, the group felt weakness and fear, realizing that his death also meant their own vulnerability. Burial thus became a way to confront fear, to anchor meaning in the face of the unknown. The earth was, for them, a great mother. They emerged from it and returned to it. Burying the dead within it was part of a primitive cosmic vision, reminding them that all things eventually return to their origin. In some areas, archaeologists have found evidence of color used in funerary rites, particularly red pigment extracted from hematite. It was sprinkled on the body, symbolizing blood, renewing life, or ensuring a rebirth in another world. This color was not used for any other occasion, signaling that death held a unique significance, a silent celebration unlike anything else. Daily life thousands of years ago was simple, harsh, and vast like the earth itself. Humans moved with the seasons, knew the locations of food and water, and avoided places where predators roamed. Yet they were capable of joy, celebrating a successful hunt, protecting their children with primitive care. Fire was their eternal companion, around which they told short stories of the animals that survived, of storms that struck, of spirits that perhaps roamed at night. Over time, these stories evolved into the beginnings of early mythology, tales explaining what they could not understand. Through the millennia, humans began telling the story of burying their dead as a way of understanding themselves. It started with a simple mound of soil over a still body, then grew into a ritual, then a symbol, then a form of belief. And throughout it all, one thing remained constant: humanity. Primitive though they were, early humans were never devoid of feeling. From the very beginning, they recognized the value of existence, and that death demanded its own respect, respect immortalized only in those earliest graves, whose echo still lingers in the earth today. As the story stretched across thousands of years, humans themselves began to take shape, not only in body, but in consciousness. Their minds started to notice the subtle details of life and death, just as a child notices the first hints of the world around them. Time moved slowly, yet the human mind absorbed something new with each generation, often without fully realizing it. When a body was buried beside the fire, at the entrance of a cave, or beneath a large tree, The place took on a different aura, as if the act of burial itself changed the breath of the earth. Daily life was fraught with challenges, yet it was never devoid of calm moments. Humans would sometimes sit by a stream, watching small fish swim, listening to water striking rocks. Without words, they sensed that nature spoke to them in a hidden language. When rain fell after days of drought, it was seen as the earth's mercy. When birds migrated, they knew a new season had arrived. This profound connection with nature was central to their understanding of life and shaped how they viewed death as well. For early humans, death was not a strange event, but another step in the cycle of nature. They observed how old trees fell to feed new plants, how animals preyed upon one another to maintain balance, and how small birds died and their bodies returned to the grass. Human death was not a mysterious accident. It was part of the universal law of existence, even in its simplicity. This understanding gave them a remarkable ability to face loss without despair. Over time, groups settled temporarily in particular areas during certain seasons, even while needing to move. The place where a member of the tribe was buried gradually became a fixed point in a changing world. When they returned years later, they knew that beneath a small mound lay someone who had once lived among them. This knowledge provided a profound sense of continuity, as if time were not merely a river sweeping everything away, but a current carrying the memory of its banks. Occasionally, the tribe would stand at these burial sites, not to perform rituals or revive the dead, but simply because being near them reminded the living that they were not alone in the universe. Children listened as elders spoke the names of those who had passed. Names not pronounced as we know them today, but as simple sounds carrying the essence of the person more than a linguistic form. Even fleeting remembrance became part of the collective memory. Beyond these quiet moments, life pressed on with its weight and reality. Hunting was perilous work, requiring skill and patience. Some days the tribe returned laden with food. On others, they returned empty-handed, relying on roots and fruits. This constant fluctuation between abundance and scarcity taught them the value of sharing. If one of them died during a hunt, it was a lesson for all, not of fear, but of awareness that the survival of the group mattered more than the strength of any individual. As the years passed, humans noticed that some animals also behaved uniquely toward their dead. They saw elephants gathering around the bones of a fallen member of their herd, or wild dogs remaining near a dead companion for hours. Such scenes, witnessed repeatedly, likely sowed the seed of understanding that grief was not exclusive to humans. It was a natural part of life. This awareness made burial seem more in harmony with the world. From time to time, the tribe would uncover ancient human bones buried beneath layers of soil. They did not know to whom these remains belonged. Yet they recognized that the earth had held humans before them. These moments were like silent messages from distant ages, telling them that they were part of an endless chain whose beginning is impossible to imagine. They touched the bones gently, then covered them again, as if apologizing for disturbing their rest. Stories told around the fire were nourished by such discoveries. Tales stretched from the brave hunter killed during a hunt, to the woman who died giving birth, to the child whose brief life left a mark. Despite their simplicity, these events etched themselves into the memory of the group, shaping their perception of time. Life was no longer just hunting and moving. It became a continuous story shared by the living and the dead alike. Thus, the story of humans, thousands of years ago, was a blend of survival and existence, fear and serenity, death and burial, memory and instinct. They walked the earth in slow, steady steps, each leaving a faint trace on the soil, like a child's finger on soft clay. With each new generation, humans grew wiser and more aware, without losing the original simplicity that made death a natural part of their long journey. And so, when we look today at the story of humanity's earliest days, we see that it was not merely a journey of seeking food and shelter, but also a quest for meaning, a way to understand what happens when breath ceases and the earth alone remains as witness. The act of burying their dead was not a complex ritual, nor a fully formed philosophy. It was a simple, instinctive act, carrying more respect than words ever could. They placed the body beneath the soil, yet alongside it, they placed a piece of their belonging, a fragment of their awareness that the past deserves preservation, and that human life has value beyond the fleeting moments it inhabits. Those earliest graves, scattered across ancient caves and deserted plains, are not merely silent relics. They are messages from a distant age, telling us that from the very beginning, humans did not live as fleeting beings without memory or feeling. They lived carrying within them the seeds of empathy, respect, and wonder. Over centuries, these seeds grew into civilizations, rituals, and myths. But the origin of the story was much simpler. A group of humans standing around a departed body, placing it gently into the earth, and then continuing on their way, carrying in their hearts the meaning of the first human life. And thus the story reaches its completion, a story of life pushed by hardship into wisdom, guided by nature toward understanding, and shaped by experience to make death part of the journey, not its end. A story that began thousands of years ago continues within us today, with the same quietude and the same ancient question that has never been answered. What awaits humanity after returning to the soil? Yet whatever the answer may be, that very first beginning still tells us, from the moment humans became aware of death, they also began to know themselves. On a silent night, long before time itself seemed to have begun, the world knew no cities, no roads, no signs of civilization. Fire alone pierced the darkness. Imagine its smoke rising slowly into the sky, while men and women huddled around it in a small circle. Their faces were smeared with clay and soot, their eyes fixed on the wilderness, as if afraid that something hidden in the night might awaken. It was in that ancient time, thousands of years ago, that the first human stories were born, and with them, a quiet tale that only the soil remembers, how early humans buried their dead, and how they lived in a world of harshness and wonder. They lived on the edges of forests and valleys, tracking animal trails, listening to the wind, knowing that survival depended on reading the signs of the world. Each day was an unpredictable adventure, gathering fruits at dawn, hunting prey, returning before darkness to shelters carved in rock or covered with dry branches. There was no language as we know it, only whispers, gestures, and calls. But still, they understood one another, instinctively. And though their lives focused entirely on survival, something quietly stirred within them, an awareness of death, of the one who disappears and does not return. At first, death was simply disappearance. When a member fell, the others watched in silence, then moved away, as if an invisible force had taken them. Bodies were left exposed on a rock, under a tree, without ritual, without ceremony. Life moved too quickly to linger, but as time passed, social bonds deepened and grief and attachment emerged. Humans discovered a new way to confront absence. The first burials were simple, a mound of soil over the body to protect it from predators. Yet some ancient graves show something more. Bodies placed in specific positions, accompanied by stone tools, bones, or shells, evidence that early humans buried their dead, not only for protection, but for a deeper reason, perhaps to provide what might be needed on the next journey, or because the idea of life beyond death was beginning to take shape in their minds. Some tribes buried their dead near their homes, inside caves or carefully prepared pits. Bodies were laid on their sides, as if preparing to sleep, covered gradually with soil. Soft chants, murmured words, or gentle tapping of stones often accompanied the burial. Humans stood around the body, watching as it disappeared beneath the earth, preserving something important, a final act of care for one who had lived among them. Burial was not merely disposal. It became emotional, collective. When a strong member or skilled hunter died, the group felt vulnerability. His death reminded them of their own mortality. Burial anchored meaning in the face of the unknown. The earth was their mother. They emerged from it, and they returned to it. Burying the dead was part of a primitive cosmic vision, a recognition that all things eventually return to their source. In some places, archaeologists discovered traces of color used in funerary rituals, especially red pigment from hematite. Sprinkled on the body, it symbolized blood, life, and rebirth in another world, a silent, solemn celebration, marking death as something extraordinary. Life thousands of years ago was simple, harsh, and vast. Humans moved with the seasons, seeking food and water, avoiding predators, yet they celebrated successful hunts, children's safety, the warmth of fire around it. Stories were told of surviving prey, fierce storms, wandering spirits over time. These stories became the first myths, attempts to explain what they could not yet understand. Across millennia, humans told the story of burying their dead, slowly understanding themselves. It began with a simple mound of soil, then became ritual, symbol, belief, and through it all, one thing remained constant: humanity. Primitive though they were, humans felt deeply, recognizing the value of life and honoring death. Those earliest graves, scattered in caves and plains, were more than silent traces. They were messages from the distant past, telling us that humans were never fleeting beings without memory or feeling. They carried the seeds of empathy, respect, and wonder. Over centuries, these seeds grew into civilizations, rituals, and myths. But the origin was simple: a group of humans standing around a departed body, placing it gently into the earth, then continuing their journey, carrying in their hearts the meaning of the first human life. Life, guided by hardship, led to wisdom. Nature shaped understanding. Experience taught that death was part of the journey, not its end. A story that began thousands of years ago continues within us, with the same quietness and the same question that remains unanswered. What awaits humans after returning to the soil? Yet whatever the answer may be, that first beginning whispers to us still. From the moment humans recognized death, they began to understand themselves, and so the earth remembers the first graves, the first quiet farewells, the first simple acts of respect. All are part of a story that continues in every life and every passing moment, from the dawn of humanity until today. Night fell across the ancient world, silent and vast. There were no cities, no paths, no signs of civilization. Only fire lit the darkness. Smoke rose slowly, curling toward the stars, while men and women sat in a small circle. Their faces were streaked with clay and soot, their eyes alert, as if the shadows themselves might awaken. It was here, in this ancient silence, that the first human stories were born. and with them, the tale that only the earth has kept, how early humans buried their dead, and how they lived in a world of wonder and danger. They roamed the edges of forests and valleys, following animal tracks, listening to the whispers of the wind. Survival depended on understanding signs in the world around them. Each day was an unpredictable adventure, gathering fruits at dawn, hunting prey, returning before nightfall to shelters carved from rock or made of branches. There was no spoken language as we know it, only gestures, whispers, and calls. Yet they understood one another instinctively, and though their lives were devoted to survival, something quietly grew within them, a sense of death, of the one who disappears and does not return. At first, death was merely disappearance. When a member fell, others watched in long silence, then stepped away, as if an invisible hand had taken them. Bodies were left exposed on rocks, under trees, without ritual or ceremony. Life moved too quickly to pause, but as centuries passed, human bonds deepened. Grief, attachment, and fear began to emerge. Humans discovered a different way to cope with absence. The first burials were simple. Soil mounded over the body to protect it from predators. Yet over time, archaeologists found traces of something more profound. Some bodies were laid in specific positions, accompanied by stone tools, bones, or shells. Early humans did not bury their dead merely for protection. They did so to honor them, perhaps to prepare them for another journey, or because the idea of life beyond death had begun to awaken in their minds. Some tribes buried their dead near their homes, inside caves or in carefully prepared pits. The body was laid on its side, as if readying for sleep, and covered slowly with earth. Sometimes, soft chants, murmured prayers, or gentle tapping of stones accompanied the burial. The group stood around the grave, watching the body disappear beneath the soil, preserving a final act of care for someone who had lived among them.